Hello everyone, I hope you are doing great. In this last chapter, we're going to look at psychological disorders. Imagine that you are watching a movie, and the main character battles inner demons and faces tremendous anxiety. You enjoy the movie, but have you ever wondered what the true stories are behind those conditions? Well, in this chapter, we are going to not only learn about the symptoms of psychological disorders, but also recognize the importance of mental health in our lives. So let's start. Now let's look at the module introduction. In this module, we will look at first the definition of abnormal behavior, and then we will look at DSM-5. After that, we will go over the different categories of psychological disorders, including anxiety disorder, dissociative disorder. We will also look at depressive and bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, and eating disorders. And then we will focus on the relationship between mental illness and suicide, which is an important topic. And then we will look at the warning signs of suicide and, more importantly, how to prevent suicide. After you watch the video, remember to take the Week 6 quiz. Next, let's look at the objectives in this course. So in this module, after you watch the video, you will be able to define abnormal behavior and understand how it is different from normal behavior. And you will know the role of DSM-5. And then you will be able to describe the different categories of psychological disorders and the specific types of disorders under each category. And then you will explore the relationship between mental illness and suicide, the warning signs of suicide, and how to prevent suicide. So these are the things that we're going to cover in this chapter. Now let's look at psychological disorder and abnormal behavior. So why should we study psychological disorders? Why is it important, and why should we care about it? Well, according to the World Health Organization in year 2022, around the world, 1/8 of us have a psychological disorder, and it is the leading cause of disability. It could influence our emotions, our thoughts, and our behaviors. It could happen to our friends, our families, and even ourselves. So it's important to pay attention to psychological disorders. And understanding psychological disorders can help us be more aware of the people around us, seek treatment, and provide support to those in need. But you may ask, how do we know if a person has a psychological disorder? Well, think about this. A girl is sad. She cries every day, and she thinks that there's no way out. She stays in bed for more than 3 months. She's not able to go to school. Would you say this girl has a psychological disorder? Well, probably you would say yes. But how about this? A father just experienced the death of his own child. He's sad and he cries. Would you say this father has a psychological disorder? Well, you might not be sure about that, and you might say, well, you need more information. Then where to draw the line between sadness and depression? That's why we need to learn psychological disorders. So what is psychological disorders? By definition, it's a condition in which the person's thoughts, behaviors, and feelings are judged to be abnormal. But then what is abnormal? There are some ways of defining abnormal. So let's look at them. First, subjective discomfort. People with psychological disorders may report their subjective discomfort. They may report that they have depression, panic, or anxiety. And second, social nonconformity. That is disobeying the standard for a normal conduct in the society. And then third, statistical abnormality. That means some people may have the extreme scores on the scales, such as depression or anxiety. But what does that mean? Have you ever taken a stats course before? Statistics. What is a normal distribution? Let's look at this. A normal distribution looks like this. It's bell-shaped. Most people will be in the middle, and only a few will be at the extremes. So, for example, our heights. Most people will be in the middle, and only a few will be very, very tall, and only a few will be very, very short. Most of us will be in the middle. Or like our grades. Most of the students will be in the middle, like B+. Only a few will get an A+, and only a few will be at the extreme getting an F. And that's the same for our human behaviors. For example, anxiety. It's a normal distribution, and most people will be in the middle. But if you score extremely high or extremely low on this scale, then that could be abnormal. But we should know that being abnormal does not mean that you have a disorder. For example, if you are super smart and you have an IQ of 130, so you're not within the normal range, you're at the extreme. But does that mean you have a disorder? No. So we should know that being abnormal is not always a disorder. Then next, let's think about this scenario to learn more about normal and abnormal. Let's look at this together. So Mr. X, he's 60 years old and he's currently engaged to and planning to marry a woman who's just 21. Mr. X has 6 children, and only one of whom actually lives with him, and the child is 16 years old. Mr. X has been married and divorced 5 times, and he will be starting his 6th marriage in a couple of months. So what do you think? You might say, oh wow, and yes. So is Mr. X's behavior normal or abnormal, and why? Or is Mr. X's behavior sane or insane, and why? Well, you can think about this scenario, and there's no correct answer. You may say, well, it depends. Maybe if in our culture it's not that normal, but in some other cultures it's absolutely normal. So, well, you might have different opinions, and what is normal and what is abnormal? Let's look at the definition. So what is abnormal behavior? Well, when we consider behavior normal or abnormal, we usually rely on the following criteria. So first, is it deviant? Does it violate the social norms? And then second, dysfunction. Is it maladaptive? Does the person have the dysfunction, cognition, or behaviors? And third, distress. Some people may report emotional distress, such as panic or anxiety. And we should know that, for example, depressed people, they may report pain, but they may not have deviance or dysfunction. So all the criteria do not have to be met for a person to be considered abnormal. And the last one is danger. If the person shows danger to themselves or to other people, then the person might be considered abnormal. And when we talk about normal and abnormal, it seems like there are 2 groups, normal and abnormal, but in reality, it's hard to put people just into these 2 groups, normal and abnormal. We should know that it is actually on a continuum. And when we consider behavior normal or abnormal, we should take into consideration the situational context and cultural relativity. So, for instance, is it normal to be naked in public? Well, you might say that it's not normal if we're naked in the classroom. But what if you're in the shower area or you're in the locker room and the gym? Then that might be normal to be naked. So the situational context is important. Then cultural relativity is also important. For example, eating bats. Well, eating bats may not be normal in some cultures, but it might be normal in some cultures. They might eat bats occasionally. So when we consider behavior normal or abnormal, it's very important to take into consideration the situational context and cultural relativity. Now we know how to define abnormal behavior, but we still need a more systematic and standardized way to make diagnoses for psychological disorders. So now let's look at DSM-5. So DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorder, and it's published by the American Psychiatric Association, and now it's in its 5th edition. It's called DSM-5. So it provides the standard system so then the researchers, clinicians, and public health professionals can communicate about psychological disorders. Well, it's organized into the categories, and under each category, there are several specific types of psychological disorders. It's a book, and it includes information such as description and symptoms of the mental illnesses. So the book, DSM-5, was published in 2013. And then in year 2022, there's a revision. So now it's called DSM-5-TR, text revision. So that is the book that we can use to make diagnoses for psychological disorders. Next, let's look at psychological disorders. Well, we're not able to cover all of the hundreds of diagnoses listed in DSM-5. However, we will introduce the major categories of the psychological disorders in this course, and we will also look at some specific types of psychological disorders under each category. So now we will start with anxiety disorders. What is anxiety? Or what are the feelings or the reactions that you have when you feel anxious? You might think that you're nervous or you're sweating. Well, anxiety refers to the feelings of apprehension, dread, and uneasiness. Then how about anxiety disorders? It's a class of disorders, and it's characterized by the excessive fear or anxiety. And there are 4 components. So first, we have the physical component. It refers to the activation of our biological system. So for example, we enter fight or flight. Do you remember that term? We talked about that before. And next, we have the cognitive component. So people might experience exaggerated danger. And then the third component is the emotional component. People with anxiety disorder may have some emotions such as anxiety, panic, or some fears. And the last component is behavioral component. It refers to coping, such as freezing or showing aggressive behaviors. So those are the components in anxiety disorders. Then under this category, we will be looking at several types of anxiety disorders. So first, GAD, generalized anxiety disorder. It's like the free-floating anxiety that is not tied to any specific threat. And then we have phobia. Phobia means that we're afraid of a specific thing. And next, we will look at panic disorder. It refers to the sudden episode of panic attack. And next, we will also look at agoraphobia. These people are afraid of going out. And we also have the OCD, that people have some unwanted and intrusive thoughts, and they need to do something to reduce their anxiety. Or PTSD, it usually occurs after the traumatic event. So we're going to look at these different anxiety disorders one by one. But you may ask, what causes anxiety disorders? Researchers now agree that it's the combination of several factors that contributes to the development of anxiety disorders. So for example, our genetics. Anxiety disorders might run in the family. That is, if your parents or your siblings have an anxiety disorder, then you are at greater risk. Then next, brain chemistry. It refers to the imbalance of our neurotransmitters in the brain. It could also play a role. And our personality. Well, some personality traits might also be related to anxiety disorders. So maybe you're a person who tends to worry a lot, or maybe you like to think a lot. then you might have the tendency to have the anxiety disorder. In addition, life events such as divorce or abuse might also play a role. And lastly, learned behavior. Research found that if we grew up in an environment with anxiety, then we're more likely to have the negative coping mechanisms and also the negative thinking patterns. So those are the factors that might contribute to the development of anxiety disorders. Now we're going to look at the different types of anxiety disorder, and that starts from GAD, Generalized Anxiety Disorder. Well, this disorder is characterized by the excessive and uncontrollable worry about things, but we don't know what they are. So there's no specific threat that we are afraid of. And people with this disorder might be worried about a lot of things. And they think that they cannot control it and they cannot handle uncertainty. And it is impossible for them to relax. So they keep worrying about several things. That's GAD. Studies found that it's more common in women than in men. So women are more likely to experience GAD compared with men. So that is the first anxiety disorder. Then next, let's look at phobia. So let's talk about simple phobia. Simple phobia refers to the intense and irrational fear of a thing. So we're afraid of a specific thing. And we know that the fear is irrational and is unreasonable, but we just cannot control it. And we should know that normal fear is different from the intense fear. For instance, you might be afraid of rats. But if you're not looking at rats, then you're fine. So that's just the normal fear. However, well, for some people with the simple phobia, they're afraid of rats. And just by hearing the term rats, they're nervous, they have a racing heart, and they feel that they cannot breathe. And that is the intense fear. So we should know that intense fear is different from the normal fear. People with simple phobia may have the intense fear or anxiety, and they will try to avoid the things that they are afraid of. They may also have the impairments in their functioning, that they are afraid of the thing to the point that they are not able to function well. The common phobias include the fear of rats, bugs, height, water, or storms. And there might be some other phobias that we cannot imagine, such as the fear of purple color or the fear of number 13. And so phobia usually begins in childhood and it could continue into our adulthood. So that is simple phobia. Then how about social phobia? Social phobia refers to the fear, the intense and irrational fear of being observed by others. So these people are afraid of being judged, being humiliated, or being embarrassed by other people. And that's why they may avoid situations such as speaking, writing, or eating in front of others. So it could influence our daily functioning, and a lot of people are affected by social phobia. Well, in the study, researchers recruited people with social phobia and people without any psychological disorders. And researchers told them that, okay, so now you're going to give a speech and please get prepared. And researchers found that both groups, both people with social phobia and the normal group, showed the increased heart rate. But people with social phobia had a higher level of the increased heart rate. In addition, those with social phobia also reported a higher level of anxiety compared to the normal group. So researchers found that individuals with social phobia are afraid of being observed. If they know that they're going to give a speech, they are nervous. And they're nervous to the point that they might show a lot of fears and they will report higher anxiety, and they also have the increased heart rate. So that is social phobia. Next, let's look at panic disorder. So imagine that you're with your friends, you're hanging out, and you're having fun. But soon, you're hit by an overwhelming wave of panic and fear. that you think that you're losing control, and then you are not able to breathe, you're not able to function well. That is a panic attack. And the panic disorder refers to the sudden panic attack that happens usually unexpectedly. So people with panic disorder may lose control. They're afraid of the panic attack and they think that there's no help. So they may have increased heartbeat and they might be breathing fast. And so they may avoid the places that panic attack had happened in the past. Panic disorder has been found to be more common in women than in men. So these people are worried about future attacks, and then they might be worried a lot about that to the point that they don't want to go to the places. Then next, let's look at agoraphobia. Agora means open places or market, and phobia means fear. So agoraphobia means the fear to go out to public places. People with agoraphobia are afraid of going out because they are afraid that they will feel trapped or embarrassed by the situations. And they may have the fear to the point that they don't want to leave their house. That's agoraphobia. Well, so they have some symptoms. They have the fear of being in a situation where help might not be available. So they might think that there will be no help, so they don't want to go out alone. So they might be like the prisoners confined in their home. They don't want to go out alone. So that is agoraphobia. And these people, they usually experience the distress and they may have some impairments in their daily functioning. Next, let's look at another anxiety disorder, which is OCD. OCD refers to obsessive compulsive disorder. It includes O and C. Obsessions and compulsions. So what are they? Obsessions are the intrusive and unwanted thoughts. So you may be thinking like, oh, did I lock the door? Did I turn off the stove? Did I close the window? Or did I turn off the faucet? You have those unwanted thoughts. And then you have some urges to do something in order to reduce your anxiety. So you may be washing your hands, checking the doors, or checking the faucet. So you might do something to reduce your anxiety. They are called compulsions, and they are usually the senseless rituals. The common compulsions include checking, washing, putting things in order, or hoarding. Those are the compulsions that people may have. So they might think, oh, if I don't do this, something bad would happen, so I must do this. That's why they keep doing those behaviors. So people might think, oh, I have to wash my hands. Otherwise, my hands will be full of germs and viruses and they might kill me. So they will keep washing their hands. That's OCD. And OCD has been found to be equally common in women and in men. Lastly, let's look at PTSD. PTSD refers to the disorder that people may re-experience the event after a traumatic event. It could also be a surprising or scary or shocking event. Well, for example, a soldier just experienced the death of his friend in a war. He may re-experience the event again and again in the forms of nightmares or flashbacks. And he might have arousal and reactivity, but he cannot control it. So, and that could also influence his daily functioning. That is PTSD. So PTSD means that people may re-experience the event and have the reactivity, arousal, but they cannot control it. So it has been found more common in women than in men, especially for those victims of traumatic events such as rape or abuse. So these are the anxiety disorders in the category listed in the DSM-5. The next category we're going to look at is dissociative disorders. What are the dissociative disorders? Dissociative disorders are the disorders that are related to the disruptions in our consciousness, our memories, our identity, or perceptions. And so dissociation means to break or to pull apart. And dissociative disorder means that we break or pull apart our memories or identities. And under this category, we will be looking at, first, dissociative amnesia, which means that we forget the personal information surrounding an event. And then we will look at dissociative fugue. That means people may travel away from home and they don't remember their past. And the last one is DID, dissociative identity disorder. That means there are two or more personality states in one single individual. So we will look at that one by one. But then what are the causes for dissociative disorders? Well, again, it could be related to several factors, such as trauma, severe stress, or psychological conflicts. When our mind is not able to deal with the trauma, then our mind might dissociate, so then we can be protected from the traumatic experiences. So now let's look at dissociative disorders. The first dissociative disorder we're going to look at is dissociative amnesia. It refers to the inability to recall the personal information surrounding a traumatic event. So it's not like forgetting where you put your keys or where you park your car. It's more like forgetting the entire event, the people, and your personal information surrounding that traumatic event. So people with dissociative amnesia might not remember that event and several things surrounding that event. They might not forget the time periods, the people, or the personal information. And they may have the impairment in their cognitive functioning. It has been found to be more common in women than in men. So that's dissociative amnesia, that we forget the personal information surrounding the event. For example, you just witnessed a crime or an accident, and you forget not only about that event itself, but also the times, like days or weeks surrounding that event. So it's like pushing the delete button that erases all the memories. That is dissociative amnesia. Next, let's look at dissociative fugue. Well, it's a rare disorder, and it's a subtype of dissociative amnesia. People with this disorder may travel away from home, live their past life. They may start a new life, they may go to another city, and they don't remember who they are, and they don't remember where they were from. So that's dissociative fugue. And when they wake up from the fugue, they may not have any idea what happened during their fugue. Dissociative fugue can range from hours to even several months, and they may not know about their fugue, and they might not remember why they're there in a new city. So that's dissociative fugue. It's a subtype of dissociative amnesia, and it's a rare disorder. The third dissociative disorder we're going to look at is DID, dissociative identity disorder. So people with DID may have two or more identities in one single individual. It's formally known as multiple personality disorders, so there might be multiple personalities in an individual. For example, there might be an identity called Kathy. Kathy can speak English. Kathy can play the piano and play the flute, and Kathy is a girl. Well, there could be another identity called Joseph. Joseph is in his middle age. Joseph can speak Mandarin Chinese, and Joseph is good at painting. And Joseph is a male. So those different identities may have different personalities, different ages, different genders, different accents. They can speak different languages, and they have different interests. And they may not know the existence of each other. That is DID. So DID is usually associated with early childhood trauma, such as chronic abuse. Children might create a protector identity, so then their original identity can stay away from the abusive experience. So that's why they may have the DID. So that is dissociative identity disorder, and it's one of the dissociative disorders. Next, let's look at depression and bipolar disorder. Well, in the past, depression and bipolar disorder are put together and they are called mood disorders. But now in DSM-5, they have the separate categories. So these two disorders are associated with the disturbances in our emotions. And here we will focus on major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. But what causes these disorders? Well, again, it could be due to our genetics. If our parents or our relatives have these two disorders, then we're at greater risk of having these disorders. In addition, imbalances of neurotransmitter might also be a factor. And the stressful life events, such as moving or divorce, could also influence the development of these two disorders. So now, let's start from depression. Major depressive disorder. People with major depressive disorder are sad. They think that there's no hope in life and no purpose in life. They may think slowly and talk slowly. They may not have appetite. They may have insomnia. They're not able to sleep well, or some of them may sleep all the time. So they might lose interest in their favorite activities. They don't want to go out. They have social withdrawal. They don't want to go to school, and they don't want to hang out with their friends anymore. So those are the symptoms of having the major depressive disorder. And studies found that it's more common in women than in men. Next, let's look at bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder includes two episodes: depressive episodes and mania episodes. When people are in their depressive episode, they show the symptoms just like those with major depressive disorder. They're sad, they think there's no hope, no purpose in life. They have no appetite, and they're tired. They don't want to go out to hang out with friends anymore. But on the other hand, when they're in the manic episode, they're energetic, they're euphoric, and they have non-stop thoughts. They have a lot of great ideas. They are creative. They can talk non-stop. And so they can do a lot of things and they're not tired. They have good appetite, they don't have to sleep, and they may have hypersexual activities. So we can see that these two states are like two polars. That's why it's called bipolar disorder. And it's been found to be equally common in women and in men. Then you may think that the manic episode sounds great. Well, if we are energetic, we're euphoric, we can have a lot of great ideas, that sounds great. And indeed, many people question if there's a relationship between bipolar disorder and creativity, because there are a lot of celebrities who might have bipolar disorder. So you can see the names on the screen. People question, is bipolar disorder related to creativity? Well, research found that it might be due to the manic episode. We know people during manic episode are euphoric, they have great ideas, and they are creative. So during this time, they have a lot of ideas. They can create great works, they can create music and art, and that's why there might be a relationship between bipolar and creativity. It can be explained by the manic episode. The next category we're going to look at is schizophrenia. So what is schizophrenia? It's characterized by several features such as delusions, hallucinations, also the impaired functioning or disorganized speech. Although we can see many cases of schizophrenia in movies or in news, we should note that the prevalence rate is actually pretty low compared with the other psychological disorders. And then what are the causes for schizophrenia? Well, first, genetics. Well, if you have some close relatives having schizophrenia, then you are at a higher risk of having this disorder. In addition, brain structure abnormalities. Research found that people with schizophrenia show some differences in their brain structures. And the imbalances of neurotransmitters might also play a role. And then prenatal factors such as maternal malnutrition, can also influence the baby, so their babies are more likely to have schizophrenia later in life. And lastly, stress. Well, stress alone cannot cause schizophrenia, but experiencing stress might trigger the symptoms of schizophrenia and might also make the condition worse. So those are the factors that might influence the development of schizophrenia. Now we're going to look at the symptoms of schizophrenia. The first symptom is delusions. Delusions are the false beliefs that are clearly out of touch with reality, but these beliefs are maintained. So people with schizophrenia might have the delusions. They may believe that they are a tiger or they are a rabbit. And people with schizophrenia might also have the delusions of grandeur. That is, they think that they're famous, they're special, or they're unique. So for example, they might think that they can fly, or they might think that they are having a romantic relationship with a movie star. That is called delusion of grandeur. And their thinking process is chaotic. They may switch their topics in a disjointed way. In addition, people with schizophrenia may have the deterioration of their adaptive behaviors. They may ignore personal hygiene, they may not take a bath, they may not brush their teeth. Moreover, people with schizophrenia may have hallucinations. That means they have the distorted perceptions, especially auditory hallucination, which has been reported by several cases of schizophrenia. Auditory hallucination means that they can hear the voices even though there's no one there. So they might hear the voices talking to them, saying that, oh, someone from the Mars is going to visit you, so you have to get prepared. Or they might hear voices saying that your neighbor is going to poison you, so you must be aware of your neighbor. And they will believe in those voices. That's auditory hallucination. In addition, people with schizophrenia might also show the disturbed emotions. That is, they may show the inappropriate emotions that don't go well with their situation or that don't go well with what they're talking about. So these are the symptoms that people with schizophrenia may have. Now let's look at the last category, eating disorders. Eating disorders are related to our eating behaviors. So that is, we may have insufficient or excessive eating disorders to the point that is detrimental to our physical or mental health. That is called eating disorders. And under this category, we will be looking at 3 types of eating disorders, including first, anorexia nervosa. That means people don't want to eat. They starve themselves because they believe that they are fat. And the second disorder is bulimia nervosa. They may binge eat, but then they feel guilty, so they will do something to lose weight. And the third type of eating disorder is binge eating disorder. They eat a lot, but after they eat, they don't do anything to lose weight. And we will take a closer look at them later. Then, what are the causes of eating disorders? Well, first, genetics. Well, genetics might influence our eating disorders. It could run in the family. And then next, cultural or societal influences. Well, if in our society, physical appearance is valued, and maybe due to media, people think that, oh, a girl should be beauty. If she's thin, then we might be influenced by those body images. And the psychological factors, such as our self-esteem, our disturbed body image, could also influence our development of eating disorders. So now let's look at the first eating disorder, anorexia nervosa. People with this disorder may have the intense fear of gaining weight. Although they're abnormally skinny, they still believe that they are fat. They are afraid of gaining weight or becoming fat. And then they may have the distorted body image. They think that they're not happy with their body. They might think, oh, I don't like my arms, or I don't like my thigh. I have to lose some weight. And that could lead to restricted food intake that they may starve themselves literally. They don't want to eat at all. Or they may use some methods such as excessive exercising to lose weight. And there are two subtypes under anorexia nervosa. The first type is called restricting type. So people with this type of anorexia nervosa may starve themselves. They don't want to eat because they are afraid of becoming fat. And the second type is called binge eating purging type. These people may occasionally binge eat, but then they will purge in order to lose weight. Anorexia nervosa has been found to be more common in women than in men. So that is the first eating disorder. The second eating disorder we're going to look at is bulimia nervosa. People with this disorder may binge eat. They eat a lot, but after they eat, they feel guilty. So they will do something. They will do some compensatory efforts in order to lose weight, such as self-induced vomiting, fasting, excessive exercise, or misuse of laxatives. They will try to lose some weight because they feel guilty. And it's been found to be more common in women than in men, especially for adolescents. But why? Why are adolescent girls more likely to have bulimia nervosa? Do you remember imaginary audience that we talked about in the previous chapter? We said during adolescence, individuals have imaginary audience. They believe that others are watching them, so they want to impress other people. They care about their physical appearance a lot, especially for girls. If they get the information from the media that girls have to be thin in order to be called beauty, then they might believe, and when they eat, they feel guilty. They may do self-induced vomiting because they want to have the perfect body shape. So that's why adolescent girls are more likely to have bulimia nervosa compared with the other age groups. The third eating disorder we're going to look at is binge eating disorder. People with this disorder may eat a large amount of food in a short amount of time, and they think that they are not able to control it. They cannot stop eating, they cannot control what they eat and how much they eat. So they lose control, and after they eat, they feel disgusted, they feel guilty, but they would not do any compensatory efforts to lose weight as found in bulimia nervosa. So they eat rapidly than normal, and they eat a large amount of food in a short amount of time. Those are the common symptoms of having binge eating disorder. And it has been found to be more common in women than in men. So those are the eating disorders listed in the DSM-5. In the last section, we're going to look at the relationship between mental illness and suicide and how to prevent suicide. Studies found that there's a relationship between mental illness and suicide. Well, most people with psychological disorders do not die by suicide, but of those who die from suicide, a lot of them have a psychological disorder. So having a psychological disorder may increase the risk of suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and that is why we should care about this issue. And indeed, studies found that people with several psychological disorders, such as depression, bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, and eating disorders, are more likely to have suicidal thoughts. So we can see that there's a close relationship between mental illness and suicide. There are some factors that may increase the risk of suicide. For example, abuse and assault. Studies found that if people experience abuse and assault in their childhood, then they're more likely to have suicidal behaviors. And the more types of abuse, the higher the risk. Next, family history of suicide. If someone in the family died by suicide, then the other family members are also more likely to have suicidal thoughts in their lives. In addition, substance abuse such as alcoholism can also increase the risk. In addition, the feelings of hopelessness like there's no hope in life, there's no purpose in life, or the feeling of social isolation, that there's no meaningful connection with other people in your life, could also increase the risk of suicide. So these are the factors that may influence the suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Then next, let's look at the warning signs of suicide. It's important to pay attention to these signs and be aware of the people around us because we might save a life. So what are the warning signs of suicide? People who are thinking about suicide may show some verbal cues. They might be talking about death and dying. They might be talking about suicide. They will show some signs about their suicidal thoughts. So be aware of those signs. Additionally, there might be some behavioral changes. People thinking about suicide may use some substances such as alcohol, cigarette, or drugs. And they might also show some signs that they're looking for means such as weapons or pills. And there might also show some social withdrawal from their friends and from their peers, from their family members. And some of them might show more risky behaviors, such as risky driving. So if they show those behavioral changes, then they could be the signs. In addition, people thinking about suicide may have some mood indicators. They show some emotions such as anger, depression, or anxiety. Those are the important signs. And lastly, they might also show some physical signs. People thinking about suicide may show some changes in their appetite and in their sleep patterns. They may also have more complaints about their physical conditions and their physical symptoms. So if you see someone showing those signs, then show your support, care about them because you might save a life. Now we know the warning signs. And if you see your friends or your family members showing those signs, then what can we do? Lastly, we're going to look at suicide prevention. So there are several things that we can do. First, trust your instinct. If you think that something is wrong, trust your instinct and talk to the person about your concerns. Show your support, show your warmth to the person, and ask direct questions without being judgmental. Offer some emotional support to the person and do not leave the person alone. If you think that the person is thinking about suicide, then be with the person. Stay with the person, talk with the person. In addition, do not promise confidentiality. Well, if you think that the person is in danger, then you might need to report it to some agents such as schools or the person's parents or friends. So do not promise confidentiality. And if you think that the person is in danger, please encourage the person to seek professional help. You can also provide some great resources to the person to let the person know that it is totally fine to seek help. However, if you are the one thinking about suicide, then talk to the person you trust. Talk to your parents, talk to your friends, or talk to your colleagues. And there are also a lot of great resources online that you can search for. So remember that you're not alone, you're loved. So these are the things that we can do to save a life, to prevent suicide. So that is all for this chapter, Psychological Disorders. In this chapter, we talk about the definition of abnormal behavior and how it is different from normal behavior. We also look at the role of DSM-5, and then we went over the different categories of psychological disorders, including anxiety, dissociative disorders, depressive and bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, and eating disorders. And then we also look at the relationship between mental illness and suicide, the warning signs of suicide, and how to prevent suicide. Now you can take the week 6 quiz and you will have 30 minutes to complete the quiz. After you take the quiz, you can move on to the last module. We will be talking about a conclusion for this course. So that is all for this chapter, and thank you for watching the video.